In the news, there have been several reports relating to gun-related violence. These incidences have put many people's lives in danger, which is why the government has passed RA 1591, or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act, in July of 2012.
So with the title itself, it actually encompasses everything and anything that talks about guns here in the Philippines. We appreciate na meron ng lumabas na batas that would actually regulate and codify kung ano yung mga kailangan sa larangan ng pagbabaril. Because for so long, we did not have any law that actually address our concerns as gun owners as well. However, having said that, we feel na the law itself and even the IRR may mga policies that actually goes against the very fabric of our Constitution. We feel that there are provisions that are unconstitutional and thereby illegal.
In the hopes of lessening the occurrences of irresponsible ownership and usage of guns, the law states how an individual is legitimate in applying and registering for a firearm. It also states measures to ensure that the applicant and those who have been granted licenses and permits to own and carry firearms abide by these measures or risk heavy penalties.
There are 1.4 million registered firearms in the country. So sa amin bilang gun owners, responsible gun owners at that, we feel that we are being constricted when it comes to ownership. When in fact, klaro na dun sa batas na meron na kaming karapatan supposedly mag-ari, unfortunately, there are provisions in the IRR which limits our ability to own and possess firearms. The reason why I have my gun is, of course, first to protect myself, my family, and my property. I mean, this is something na hindi naman namin kailangan para ipagyabang lang. Kailangan natin proteksyonan ng sarili natin. I mean, meron tayong mga nababalitaan dyan, lumabas lang, tumawid lang, na-hold up ng riding in tandem, binaril ng walang kalaban-laban. These are things na we're sure that the police are doing their best, but the reality of the times is they really cannot protect us simultaneously or sabay-sabay. So we also need to protect ourselves.
What are the provisions under RA 10591 that states the requirements an individual needs to acquire a firearm? What are the types of licenses given to owners of firearms? What are the penalties if a gun owner has violated the law?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight we will discuss your legal rights on gun ownership and gun control, what you need to know about the responsibilities of owning and using firearms, and what you need to do to uphold that responsibility.
Our guests for tonight are June Puno, President of Go Act, and Attorney Rod Moreno, Vice President and Legal Counsel of Go Act. Good evening, and thank you for being here, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Hi, Karen, Rod. Good evening.
Tocayo and Compañero.
Compañero, right?
It's very rare,
Karen,
very rare in the show that we have two Attorney Rods.
Right.
And of course, June. Good evening. Of course, now this thing has become quite controversial, no? With there's a new law that was passed last year, and I believe the IRR just got issued. Right?
Yes.
So there's a number of things in people's minds, especially the gun owners. No? First off, I guess we can ask. No, I mean, what are the highlights of this law?
Well, for us, the individual gun owners, we're very grateful for the law, actually, because this is a historic law, because for the first time, it recognizes the rights of legal gun owners to own and carry their weapons. And it
Outside of the home.
outside of their homes or offices. And it provides the qualifications to own a gun, the qualifications to carry a gun, what the process is. In that sense, we are very, very grateful for it. Be that as it may, there are certain provisions in the law, as well as the IRR passed by the PNP, which actually tend to stifle those rights unfairly. And that is our concern at the moment. So that is where things stand right now.
Okay. Do you guys think that this law is progressive? Considering in the US, it's the opposite. So many people are lobbying for more gun control. And prior to that, they were very, I would say, more lenient, especially compared to the Philippines. So would you say it's a
step towards the right direction?
Yes, towards the right direction, or basically more regressive in terms of being able to empower people or is this something that might increase the crime rate?
Well, as Attorney Rod said, no, it actually helps the gun owners to have a better perspective of gun laws, and also if it will eventually help in gun control. Except that what we're saying is that some of the provisions within the law itself hamper the ability of some of the legal gun owners to really get to own and carry their guns. No? And in my personal opinion, gun control is really an issue of enforcement, not really an issue of the legal gun owners.
Restricting the ownership. Because there are two aspects here. One is as you would say, the licensed firearms, and also the loose firearms.
Right.
I mean, what stats are we looking at in terms of loose firearms?
Well, as I understand it from the PNP, there are right now about 600,000 unlicensed and unregistered firearms floating around.
Wow.
And that's a very
And
big number.
how many are licensed?
1.7
million, yes.
Okay. All right.
So
around one-third.
Right.
Something like one-third.
1.7 million, then another 600 unregistered and licensed. So, as June was saying, it's really a question of enforcement, just like everything else in this country. If laws are not enforced properly, you can pass all the laws you want, but you still have a lot of loose firearms if it's not properly enforced.
June, I'm curious, is there a correlation between loose firearms and crime? Meaning, based on the statistics, does it appear that for those that are used for crime, they're more the loose firearms and not those owned by licensed firearm owners?
Well, definitely, no. I guess as statistics would bear us out, and this actually came from the PNP themselves. In one instance, they mentioned a figure of about 2,000 plus gun-related crimes. Of those crimes, only less than 1% were actually coming from supposedly licensed firearms. Now, why I say supposedly, because you have to qualify the licensed. Are they expired licenses? So that's different. That can fall under loose firearms also. Or are they really licensed firearms and used for what purpose? Maybe it was for self-defense, maybe it was for accidental firing or whatever. But the statistics are very low in terms of the licensed gun owners. So if you're talking about that, that's 2,000 out of so many number of loose firearms. That's a big number still. And that's where the crime rate really gets affected. It's not really coming from the licensed gun owners.
Right. In fact, if I may add, Karen, speaking about statistics, consistently the PNP has said over the past 20 years, 99% of crimes involving firearms involve loose or unlicensed firearms. So that's a consistent figure throughout the past 20 years. So I think the remaining 1%, well, if those people really use their firearms improperly, they really should be prosecuted in jail. No? And in fact, the question there also, Rod, Karen, is that 1% of the involving licensed firearms, really, the statistic is based on what? Does this involve self-defense, for example? Because then you will automatically be charged in court. So my question to the PNP is, is this 1%? Is this truly things like robbery, murder, or is it truly simply being charged for in a self-defense situation? So really, you can see that the use of licensed firearms for crime is practically negligent. Yes.
Negligent. No,
Yeah, when we started off
Yeah.
the show, Rod mentioned about basically the responsibility
Yes.
of owning firearms. So I guess since we were talking about licensed firearms and loose firearms, let's go first to the basics. Who can legally own firearms?
Well, RA 10591 spells it out. Basically, 21 years old, Philippine citizen, with someone who's gainfully employed or has income, never been convicted of a crime, basically things like that. And
You mean it's not difficult?
no, it is actually.
But there are
Okay.
there are provisions that you require psychiatric tests, drug clearances.
Correct, yes,
I
things
think
like that.
clearances that you haven't been convicted of a
Correct,
crime.
correct. So it actually, Karen, to answer your question, it is difficult in the sense that ownership of firearms requires proper citizenship You need to be paying your taxes.
Proper citizenship, do you have to be Filipino?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And what I
so-
mean by proper citizenship is you're paying your taxes, never
Yeah.
been convicted of a crime.
But
things
I
like
guess
that.
for the viewers out there, so you have to be Filipino when
Yes.
you apply.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what about those who are former Filipinos who are now American citizens or other
Well,
citizenships?
I think, Karen, there's the Citizenship Reacquisition Act. Where
yeah,
you
if
can
you're
be a dual
dual,
citizen.
but if you're here, but you're of course a foreigner, even if you're formerly
Mm-hmm.
Filipino, if you did not get dual citizenship, you cannot qualify.
I don't believe so,
I
no.
don't think so.
Okay, so bad news for my
But-
husband. He can't own a
But he
firearm
wasn't former.
here.
He wasn't formerly
Good
Filipino
for
anyway.
me.
But you can only, but you yourself can
What are
only.
the
Yes.
I mean, if I am going to get a firearm, what are the types of firearms I can get?
Well, right now, Rod, under RA 10591, you're only limited to what is called small arms. These are basically pistols,
Pistols.
of basically any caliber. As long the restriction here, or even a rifle or a shotgun, but the restriction here is you cannot get what is called a fully automatic weapon. In RA 10591, that's called a Class A light weapon. These
Yeah.
are the Armalites, as they're commonly referred to.
Yeah.
For as long as they are not on full automatic meaning one squeeze of the trigger will
Yeah.
fire the entire load. You can get a rifle, an Armalite, but provided it is what is called single shot, so one squeeze of the trigger is one shot. That is
that's
basically
possible.
the restriction right now. To be frank, we in the gun-owning community, we may not necessarily agree with that, but we respect it. That is the law right now. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe there are certain levels of types of licenses, diba?
Yes.
Type A,
There are
and, as to the
different
number.
Yes, as to the number,
Yeah.
type 1,
different
type...
types.
You actually...
Can you give
own-
us like a brief
Right.
overview of these
Well,
different types?
for one type, you can own up to 3 firearms. That's for one single license. And then they call that the LTOP, which is the license to own and possess. And then you just register each firearm separately. You have a separate registration license. And then there's another type where you can own up to 5 to 7. And then there is the extreme of that, which is the collector's license, which means you can own more than 15.
Up to infinity.
Infinity. Yeah.
What would be the distinction? How do you apply for someone who owns about 5 to 7? What's the difference? Is there any specific requirement?
Well,
that
15
you have
and
to
above,
prove?
you need to be classified, certified as a gun
collector.
collector.
But the
Basically,
difference
inspection. You have to submit to certain inspection requirements with the PNP because whether you own 1 or you own 15, you need to keep it in a lock vault and in your home, and of course that's responsible ownership.
In terms of the requirements, there are really no differences, except in the
when you start being a collector.
When you
Right,
start
right,
being
right,
a
right,
collector.
right.
So you can just apply and just determine what level you want to be in.
Right.
Now, when it comes to professions, under the law, there's certain professions like media men and lawyers who can get a permit, right?
Permit
And
to carry,
permit to carry.
Yes.
What are those professions again? I know that media men and lawyers as well. but yeah.
They're spelled out in the law, and again, we're
Yeah.
grateful for that. Actually, Rod, to put it in perspective, a person who is under threat, regardless of his profession, is allowed to
I
apply and get a permit to carry his firearm outside his residence. However, however, the person has to prove that he's under threat
Right.
by getting what is called a threat assessment from the PNP. They conduct an investigation, they gather evidence.
Yeah.
However, certain professions, as you were saying, do not need a threat assessment to get the
Because
permit to
they're
carry.
already under threat.
Yes, the law recognizes that they're an imminent threat, under imminent
Wait,
threat.
we're media men and
Media
lawyers,
men,
so that means
lawyers.
we're
We have
entitled to
to-
double
Yes.
double ammunition or double firearms.
No, you can carry your fire. You don't need to prove you're under threat.
You can get as many
Yes.
numbers as you want.
Engineers, certified public accountants,
I
doctors.
understand priests and
Priests and
rabbis.
imams,
Yeah,
yes. Well,
yeah.
because imagine, Rod, I would imagine a priest in certain parts of Mindanao would be under threat.
Right, absolutely.
A priest in, with all due respect to priests who are working in parts of the mountain province, for example, would not be safe.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
things like that. Yeah.
CPAs, bank tellers as well.
Yes, right. CPAs and businessmen whose business places them
Right.
at threat. I think the construction industry is one example. Foreign exchange shops, that kind of thing.
Ah, okay.
You guys own
June,
that.
you mentioned earlier some provisions which you feel stifle gun ownership. Can you briefly state what these are?
Well, in one of the requirements, you have to get several clearances, municipal or metropolitan trial court clearances, regional trial court clearances, and all of which are meant to see whether you are in a case that's filed against
You're accused
you,
in a case
or
at
accused
the
in a
moment.
case. Now, in some instances, in one of the requirements, if you are accused or involved in a case of
Are you talking about
of
criminal case?
Criminal
or
criminal
even
case
Okay.
of a penalty of more than 2 years and above, no, you may be disqualified because you're not going to get a clearance.
Actually, you will be disqualified.
You will be
So
disqualified.
if it's pending for 2 years?
No, if
If
it's
you're just
pending,
an accused and the penalty is
yeah,
2 years
and this
or
is
higher.
just-
okay.
yeah, you're disqualified
It's
automatically.
just a pending,
Automatically,
it's just a
okay,
pending
right.
case, and you're not yet convicted, and there is no final judgment. You already will not be given a clearance, and that deters you from getting a.
So if someone files an estafa case
Yeah.
against you,
Right.
or
Exactly.
I'll give you an example, Rod.
Or even libel.
Yeah, you guys
Even
media.
even
Yes.
libel,
We
yeah.
practicing lawyers, we're liable for we're to be charged with things like grave threat, coercion. Or, best example, we all know as lawyers, Rod, Karen, you use your firearm in self-defense, you plead self-defense, you will automatically be charged in court. With homicide, it's for
With
you
homicide,
to prove
yeah.
that you use it in self-defense. During the pendency of that case, you cannot own any firearms.
You cannot
Yeah.
own a firearm.
That's really absurd.
But
and that's
then,
unfair.
Attorney Rod, if you have basically a threat, an
Right.
impending threat,
Right.
it's not an exception under the law that you have a pending case, but there's an impending threat.
No, it's not, unfortunately.
It's not,
Okay, so
unfortunately.
that's another
So in that
great,
sense, it seems to be self-defeating. The law on the one hand recognizes the threat against certain people, but at the same time it says that the moment you exercise your right to self-defense, the law recognizes the right to self-defense. It says there, oh, you lose all your guns. So can you imagine the absurdity of
You
that?
lose
Yeah,
your
that's
right
very
to
strange,
own-
no?
Right.
to
Oh,
own
even
your
if
gun.
you're already licensed,
Right.
as long as
Oh,
you get
yes,
accused, then
Yes, you have to give up all those guns.
You have
As long
to
as
give
there's
it
a
up.
case, di ba?
And then once you've been acquitted after 10 years, 15 years, you can apply again. So,
In other words, if there's a formal case filed by
Yes.
the prosecutor's office.
in court,
Yes.
yes.
In court.
The information is filed in court.
All right. Now, we have some questions from our televiewers, so let's answer them with the help of our guests, starting with Tommy, who asked, what can I file against our landlord who's harassing and threatening us by using his gun every time we have an issue or problem with him? He does this especially when he's drunk. So, nasan na yung ano nyo? Nasan na yung rent nyo?
Well, actually, that's a very, very common problem, Rod, Karen, no? And we're glad for the law because right now, depending what it is exactly this landlord is doing while he's threatening them, well, definitely he can be charged with illegal possession of a firearm.
If it's,
Because he's using, regardless of whether or not. Well, let's find out first. Is that licensed or not?
Okay. Licensed.
Let's assume it's licensed.
Yeah.
And he was brandishing, I want your rent.
There's a gun.
Yes,
problem.
he will be charged with grave threat, as the case may be.
Yeah.
But the question is, grave threat, if I remember, the penalty is fairly low. Whereas here, that will already be tantamount to illegal possession of firearms because he's using a licensed firearm in an unlawful manner. So actually, you can charge him
charge
that
him.
grave
Charge him
threat
for-
and separately for violation of
And you should.
10591.
10-5-9-1.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You
That's
should
already.
file.
You should file. You should
You
file.
should
Fine,
file.
all right.
Yeah. So Tommy, you can charge your neighbor with grave threats, and again under the new law,
Yes.
where the penalty is higher as
Yes,
well.
yes, that's right.
And then we have another question from Carlo. Can a foreigner be permitted to own and acquire a gun? This person has more than 4 guns, and he has shown them off to other people. I later learned from neighbors that he used his girlfriend to get the license and permit to own these guns.
Wow.
Actually, Karen, as we were saying, first, a foreigner cannot own a gun. Second, depending how exactly the circumstances were by
Yeah.
which this person was showing off the guns, if he was actually in possession of it, that is illegal possession. And in fact, his girlfriend, in whose name those firearms are, is also liable if, for example, she transferred possession to him. That is the beauty of it under the new law. It's both the guy who's holding the gun and the owner who gave it to him knowingly. They're both
So when you say
legally
possession,
liable.
talagang mere holding of it.
Yeah, it meant to
Outside
possess,
of
as
your
they say.
residence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
outside of the
Rod,
residence. And outside of the residence.
if I put the gun here in front of you, you're not in possession.
Yeah.
But if you walk off with it, you're in possession.
Correct.
And I could get in trouble, and so could you. And that's great, you know?
just to be technical about
Yeah,
it,
right.
I'm showing you my guns, and I give it to you. You hold it.
Right.
Just to be absurd about it to some extent, because you're right. You mentioned there are certain instances in this law that could be a bit absurd.
Right.
Is that technically possession?
Well, the law does not change the definition of possession. Possession requires the intent to possess. Merely holding a rod, I would believe, no.
No.
But if as I said, if I walk out of the studio right
Yeah.
now with it, obviously it shows I want to take it with me.
Yeah, you were saying intent to
I'd
possess.
get in trouble.
Right,
That's right.
right.
And so would you for giving it to me.
Yes.
Right.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
very interesting topic. So
Yeah.
we'll have more questions for you guys. We'll take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return. Stay tuned.
RA 10591, the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act, has stricter requirement compliance and regulations as to how an individual can acquire a firearm. Aside from requiring the applicant to be Filipino, 21 years of age, and provide proof of income and profession, the law requires the applicant to submit the following certificates according to Article 2, Section 4 of the law. Proof that the applicant has not been convicted of any crime involving moral turpitude. Proof that the applicant has passed the psychiatric, drug tests, and gun safety seminar. Police clearance from the city or municipality police office. Proof that the applicant has not been convicted or currently accused in a pending criminal case wherein the penalty is punishable of more than 2 years. In addition, those who have been given the permit to own firearms must also subject themselves in acquiring the permit to carry their firearms outside of their residence or place of residence as long as they can prove that their life is under threat or in imminent danger due to the nature of their profession. The following, according to Section 7 of RA 10591, may be given the said permit to carry firearms. Members of the Philippine Bar, including lawyers and judges, certified public accountants, accredited media practitioners, bank tellers, cashiers, priests, imams, ministers, and rabbis, physicians and nurses, engineers, and lastly, businessmen exposed to high risks of being targets of criminal elements.
You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. And with us are June Puno and Attorney Rod Moreno of Go Act.
All right. So I'm glad our guests are straight shooters and they give us straight straight answers. No, but I just wanted to ask regarding with regards to getting a license. Right. There's such a thing as parang just being allowed to possess it in your home, right, and also the license to carry. Can you I guess draw the difference there? Is there a distinction that you're given a permit but only within the home, or you're allowed to carry?
Well, basically, Rod, everyone who wants to possess a firearm needs to apply what's called for an LTOP, or wants to own a firearm needs to apply for the license to own and possess. That, in other words, you're licensing yourself. It's like a driver's license.
Yeah.
So again, you need to prove you're 21, you don't have a drug problem, that kind of thing, you know. And so when you get that, you can now own a firearm, but you're only limited to keep it in your home or the address that you provide, your condominium, your office.
So that's the basic license.
That's a basic license. Now, if you want to be able to carry it outside,
meaning in your car,
on you when you go out, you need to apply for a permit to carry firearms outside residence.
So separate yun.
Yes, that's right. That is when the PNP, the law itself does not really provide for the for the requirements for PTC4. But in practice, the PNP requires an NBI clearance, basically court clearances, that kind of thing, neuropsychiatric clearance, drug clearance, that kind of thing.
June, what about the fees for getting a license to carry a firearm and permit to carry, and the processing times?
Well, in that aspect, as of the moment, I believe the fees have not been really set up. There's supposed to be a transition period. And what they're issuing now are what they term as temporary LTOP licenses. For whatever reason, the PNP Firearms and Explosives Office has not really come out with the final fees. So we
but historically, before, when you own guns, right?
Yeah,
so what were the ranges of the fees?
Well, to get just the license before, it was about less than 2,000. I think
3,000.
Yeah, 2,000 to 3,000
per firearm.
Per firearm. That used to be a license per firearm.
And it's valid for how many years per?
Before it was valid for 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Okay.
And then to get a permit to carry, that would be about 4,000, a little over 4,000.
And that's also about 4 years.
That's 1 year.
No, that's only 1 year
lang.
per year.
Okay, so mas expensive
have to
talaga
renew.
if you want to
Right.
But at this with the new law, there is a separate LTOP. You have to pay for that, and that depends on the type of classification you want, as whether 3 firearms or 5 firearms or more. And then you have to register each of those firearms separately.
So separate payment.
That's a separate payment. So the LTOP is good for 2 years. Your gun registration is good for 4 years, each gun. and then the permit to carry is a separate license altogether.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to what Rod said earlier, there is also what is termed as a sports shooter's license. Okay,
This is for hunters.
well,
or
it's really pertaining to the
Us,
number
just-
of bullets that are allowed to carry.
Okay.
Because-
so that's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
different.
yeah.
So
Own and carry,
sports
actually.
shooters
License.
license pa, and this is just. It's not really if hunting or
Not
shooting
necessarily.
is your sport. It's just really
It's-
for the ammunition.
For the ammunition, because under your regular license, you're only allowed to have maximum of 50 ammo. Even when you carry, even if you have a permit to carry, you're only allowed
X amount. X amount.
up to 50.
50.
50. All right.
That's a maximum. But we all know that if you're engaged in a sport, just like practical shooting, you need much more than that, even to practice or to compete. So they came out with what they term as a sports shooter's license, which already built into it is a maximum number of ammo, which is like 1,000. So that
okay.
you can bring your gun to
Right,
a
to a
sporting
range or-
competition or even for hunting, and that you can carry more than 50.
Okay. Now, what are the penalties that we're talking about here when it comes to illegal possession of firearms and perhaps to illegal disposition, or what is the most?
What is the
I guess
range
what is
in
the range
terms
of,
of-
of penalties?
Well, we're glad for the law, Rod, Karen, as we were saying, because right now, the severest penalty you can get involving firearms offenses is life imprisonment. That is for what is called arms smuggling. That is really the illegal
the worst
firearms
kind,
here. Yeah, they come from smuggled firearms. So if you're bringing it into the country, out of the country, you will get a life term. Another one is illegal possession. If you're holding 3 or more unlicensed firearms, it's life in prison also. Because really, we agree with that, because what good intention could you possibly have by owning illegal firearms, and 3 at that? And you see, the problem before was, before the advent of this law, you would have many of these crime syndicates. The police, knew what they were doing, knew that they were about to rob a bank, but they were intercepted before the actual robbery. So the only thing you could charge them with back then was illegal possession of firearms, which back then was still available, and they disappeared.
Yeah.
But now, if you catch them, you catch 5, 6 of them, all with long firearms. Well, that's not available, and so it's a great tool. For
How
example.
grave are the penalties for not having a license to carry firearms and owning one at home? Kasi ang dami minsan na ganyan, they want to buy for self-defense, but they don't want to go through the process of getting the permits. So if you are caught having a gun at home without the license for it, what are the
What I
ranges?
know is there is a imprisonment term
yes,
for it,
yes.
And also a monetary
Yes,
penalty.
yes,
So-
that's right. That's
Well,
right.
you know
But
the
those are-
range?
those
If
are
you-
If I
minimums.
remember right now, Karen, the minimum you could get is up to 12 years for
12 years.
Just for
Illegal
having a gun.
Yes, yes.
And is
Illegal
it
possession.
higher if you are caught carrying a gun in your car, assuming you have a license
Yes.
to own a
Yes.
firearm, but you don't have the permit to carry,
Well,
meaning you
it's-
can't bring it
it's-
outside,
it's,
and you're caught
lesser.
with
Yeah, I
it.
think
There's
it's
a
lesser.
there's a specific provision, Karen, in the law that says that if your firearms license, but you carry it without the necessary permit to carry or permit to transport, it's up to 6 years. It's an offense in itself.
Wow.
You don't have to prove anything else. As long as you can
As
prove
long
it
as
was
they
in,
see
it
it
was in
in your
possession.
car
Yeah.
Yes.
or
harsh,
in your
Yes,
bag.
quite harsh.
And would someone in the mall, diba, every
Yeah.
time we go to the
Yes.
malls, they always check
Yes.
your bag,
Yes.
your
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
With, would the police, or sorry, security guards in the malls
Have the
have the authority to arrest you
In
for
the-
illegal possession if they see a gun and then you can't produce a
Well,
license?
In
Well,
the
ca-
license, there are
yes,
restrictions,
yes.
no, in where you can bring
Yes.
your firearms. No? Even if you have a permit to carry,
Yes.
there are specific restrictions, like you cannot bring them in public places,
Right.
supposedly.
Public
So that
drinking
includes the
places.
malls.
In-
Yeah,
including the
unfortunately,
mall,
yes.
you cannot bring them to religious places like churches,
Pro-
etc.
protest rallies, that kind of thing.
rallies. So there are specific restrictions.
So, in meaning, yung mga may bodyguards, even if they have bodyguards who are authorized to carry firearms, they're not supposed to be bringing them
If you follow the
in
current
the malls
regulation, yes.
or
no.
airports.
Yes.
You
Actually,
should- okay.
actually, Karen, Rod, carrying a permit to carrying a gun via PTC4 constitutes an authorization on your part to any law enforcer to validly check or verify
You can
whether
check.
whether you really have a PTC4, whether that's the gun covered by the permit to carry, things like that, and that's fine.
That's right.
And regarding entry into malls, well, under law, they have the right to refuse entry to anybody. And
But
if-
can they arrest?
No.
Well, the guards cannot, but
They
if
cannot.
but you see, carrying your firearm inside what's called a prohibited place, like a mall, that is not that itself is not a criminal offense, but it could be grounds for revocation of your permit to carry.
Now, regarding, I know we had a discussion prior to the show regarding some of the concerns that you have regarding the constitutionality of some provisions
Yes.
of the law. Can
Yes.
you want to expound on that? I know that there are some
Yes.
concerns and issues regarding those, I guess, what you would deem as probably bordering to unconstitutional.
Yes. Well, Rod, for example, as we said earlier, anyone who has a pending case is disqualified from owning a gun and will have his firearms revoked if he has any. We think that's really unconstitutional because what happened to the presumption of innocence? What happened to due process? The mere pendency of a case, you lose all your property, or at least your property insofar as your firearms is concerned. And also your right to defend yourself. That really bothers us.
But when you say you lose your firearms, is it because you have to surrender them?
Yes.
Or
Yes,
you
you
just...
have to.
Yes.
Okay, so very stiff.
So it's
Because
very-
as long as you're accused, you have to
Yes.
surrender.
Yes, you have to
the
surrender them
firearms.
because your license will be revoked, so you have no authority to possess them anymore.
All right. Now, we still have some questions from our viewers, this time from Moses. Wow. I saw in an online shopping site a seller selling a .45 caliber gun. Is this allowed? What should people look for if and when they are thinking of purchasing or acquiring a gun?
Well, selling online in itself a firearm is not prohibited. The question Moses should ask is that a licensed firearm? Second,
Licensed dealer. Yeah, licensed
No,
dealer.
or is the firearm licensed? And is the guy selling it, is he the license owner?
Right, okay.
And third, of course, he should make sure, Moses, if he didn't want to buy that gun, he should make sure that that the proper transfer is made in the records of the PNP. So it should now be in the name of Moses. Because you see, if he takes possession of that, he'll be liable for illegal possession. And of course, the seller, for giving it to him before the papers are transferred properly, will also be liable under the new law. And I think that's correct because
correct.
that forces responsibility.
So advertising by itself that
no.
a gun is for sale, like advertising it online, you don't need special licenses
No.
or permits.
No, not really.
Not really. But really, Moses should be worried because these are firearms. These are not designer bags, you know.
Yeah,
So I think he should be worried about who's selling, where this guy is
Yeah.
from, you know. So
Yeah.
and he should have a ballistics test done on that firearm because it could be, it might be licensed, but it might have been used for something. So,
Okay, so Moses, before you shoot the golden calf, make sure that the gun is
And
licensed.
you,
right?
or
Might as well buy it from
Yes.
the
Yeah,
legitimate
yeah,
gun
the legal
dealers.
gun dealers.
it's better
So
to
no
go
problems.
to legitimate
Yeah, no
gun
problems,
dealers.
that's right.
There's another question from Chona. What are the procedures regarding illegal possession of firearms? How can a person be sued for illegal possession of firearms, and who has the right to sue them? What if I saw someone posting his collection of firearms on Facebook? Can this be used as evidence against him? This person is a neighbor, and I'm worried for the safety of my children. Akala ko kanina theoretical question. Yung pala is
Totoo
referring
pala.
to
Yeah.
specific person.
Specific.
Well,
Yeah.
Karen, if you want to get a guy in illegal possession of firearms, as we were saying, you have to catch him in physical possession of it. Now, this fellow who apparently is exhibiting his
Exhibiting,
guns on Facebook,
When it's a selfie with a
selfie with a gun.
gun.
Selfie with guns.
actually, there's a provision in the IRR, if I remember, that firearm shall not be publicly exhibited unless it's in actual use for a legitimate
yeah.
purpose. At the very least, that might be the acts of this neighbor might result in administrative sanctions by way of revocation of his license for violating the provisions of the license. And on the other hand, you see, we gun holders, we are of course subject to inspection or verification by the PNP. So if the neighbor is truly concerned, she can get the name of this neighbor, ask the PNP to check, is this guy really a licensed firearm holder? And the PNP, in fact, should call the attention of this person to stop displaying his guns on Facebook. You know?
I see.
So you would consider posting on Facebook a public display of firearms?
Well, of course, that considering Facebook is fairly new,
Yeah.
that's not definite yet in law.
Yeah.
But for me, as a lawyer, I would think you could argue that it
You
is.
could
yes.
argue it, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, of course, if it's just, he's just, I guess depends on the picture. If
Right,
you know
right.
that it's in the house, di ba?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But you see, Facebook, unless
Yeah.
your restrictions, your settings with Facebook are such that only you can see yourself, which I
Yeah.
don't think is the case. It's the public can
Public
see
can
it.
see it, yeah,
Public
alright.
is a third party other than yourself.
All right. So okay. So we have another question. This time, Gary's asking us: can I be held liable if another person used my licensed gun? I'm currently working abroad, and the gun in question was kept inside a locked box, inside a locked cabinet. My brother-in-law, who's living in my house, broke into the cabinet and used the gun because someone was trying to rob the house.
That's
Very good
that's a
question.
that's a
What do you
very
think,
thin-
June?
That's a very
From,
thin
from someone
line
who's-
between being illegal and also, well, if it was used for self-defense. From a layman's point of view, it's easier to explain to the court why I used it than maybe being robbed or being killed by a by a robber. No? But I guess
Attorney Rod,
here-
because
evidentiary evidence, I guess.
yung sa law kasi, I think this law is specifically is mala prohibita, meaning just by
Whatever
a
your intent
prohibition,
is.
kahit ano yung intention mo, even if it's good intention, so you
Exactly,
can be
yeah.
held liable. So
Of
what do
course,
you think,
of course.
attorney?
Well, Karen, first of all, the way I understand it, at the time the brother-in-law broke into the box, the owner was not in the house. So I don't think that the owner, of the registered owner, would have any liability,
Any liability,
because he did not give it or delivered it to this fellow who used the gun.
Exactly.
Although I don't know, administratively, the owner might be questioned about why his vault was such that it was so easy to break into. So it might
It
result
was a
again in
cabinet.
revocation.
It's
But
cabinet,
the
locked
person
cabinet and
who
locked, ano?
used it
Yes.
for self-defense can be held liable under the law?
Well, if you follow the current law, yes. I mean, he may be able to escape the homicide charge because it was self-defense, but he did take possession of it, and it was not his. So
You may still be
yeah,
charged
yeah,
with illegal possession.
it might still be illegal possession, and well, that's a gray area, but you know.
So again, you would probably, that's where you're having a little bit of a question regarding the
Yeah,
constitutionality
it's
of
a
it.
bit of a,
Yeah.
as I said, it's
Could
a
be
very
unfair,
thin
could be
line.
unfair,
It's a
yeah.
very thin line between being legal or illegal. So.
Yes, but that's true. I like what June said, that from a layman's perspective, if it's your life under threat,
Yeah,
then
you'll
you,
take
It doesn't
you
matter.
will do,
It doesn't matter.
yes.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Very interesting topic, especially
Well,
since
if I may give my 2 cents worth as a lawyer, Karen, the defense of that fellow there who had to break into the cabinet to get the gun is, I don't know, he could say he didn't actually possess it because it was just there. He happened to be in the house. So, I don't know, that's probably the defense I could offer.
yeah.
As we know, in court, nothing is definite until the
Right.
judgment
Like,
comes out. You know?
Even if at that point where, let's say you had a gun that you had that permit to carry, and you were held up, and it so happened that it was your girlfriend or your
Right.
wife
Right.
who was able to get possession of it
Right.
and tried to protect both of you, then that's where I guess the thin line again comes into the picture. No?
Yeah.
Would
right.
you advise people basically to own a gun in terms of being secure in their homes? Because in the US, this was the primary argument against the gun ban. They said
Yeah.
it's constitutionally provided the right to
take up
self-defense,
arms.
the right to
Exactly.
take arms, and basically they're saying the right to defend yourself against security threats. So what's your advice to
Well,
people out there?
If you ask me, I do believe in the right to self-defense and to protect ourselves. And sadly also, here in our country, we have a problem on relying on other people to defend
Secure.
us.
To secure yourself,
So I would encourage it, again, from my point of view, and a lot of others may contradict me or disagree with me on that, but I would encourage people, as long as you follow the law strictly, and being, you have to be very responsible about owning a firearm.
If I may add, Karen, as June was saying, yes, we would encourage ownership of firearms. But you see, although owning a firearm, bearing a firearm is a right, especially under the new law, like any other right, as June was saying, it carries a responsibility, a big responsibility, and the responsibility to use it properly, to know how to use it, and also to be able to account for your actions afterwards. And so to be able to do that, you have to be, you don't necessarily have to be a lawyer, but you have to have a good sense of judgment, a good sense of discretion about
Yes.
when and when you should not use it. If you're prepared, if you have that and you're prepared to take responsibility for anything that happens, then please, by all means, you should.
And of course, another tip would be for them to read this new law very
Oh yes,
carefully.
yes,
Exactly.
yes, that's right,
Yes.
that's right, that's right.
Okay, thank you. We'll take another short break, but before we do, we'd like to thank our guests, June Puno, President of Go Act, and Attorney Rod Moreno, Vice President and Legal Counsel of Go Act. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you
helpful
very much.
information.
Yes,
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
very helpful.
Legal Help Desk will be back after these messages. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. And today we had a very interesting topic about
this is,
guns.
We were just talking about it.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I used to love guns, but now I kind of lost it. But I'm just glad that it's more, I guess,
And to
regulated.
clarify to the viewers, toy guns.
Toy guns, yeah, when I was, yeah.
And but you know, Rod, before I was very skeptical about gun regulations just because, you know, with respect to the experience of the U.S., there's a lot of
Yeah.
shooting incidents
No.
in schools, mass shootings, in the malls.
There's a lot of debate on the
Yes.
Second Amendment of the right to take arms and to
Yes,
protect yourself.
but
and-
I think under this law on gun regulations in the Philippines, it seems like there are several protections that would prevent incidents of massive shooting. And as
Yeah.
what June was saying earlier, our guest, based on the statistics, most of the guns owned or related to crimes are those that are loose firearms,
firearms,
meaning
so-
not licensed.
So there's more need for enforcement rather than yung restriction of owning licensed firearms, di ba? Kasi,
And
yeah.
and for our viewers out there, if you're interested in owning a gun, basically the basic requirements are you have to at least be 21 years old and you have to be Filipino. So bad news to foreigners out there, foreigners in the Philippines, you can't apply for a license to own firearms if you're not a Filipino citizen. And this even applies to former Filipinos who are now foreign citizens and are not dual citizens. So you really have to be Filipino.
Yeah. And
And
so for
there are
the other
several
yeah,
tests, no?
for the
Kasama na yung
other-
psychological
Yeah.
and drug
The
tests.
other requirements, no? Other requirements, of course, is that you have to show proof that you're gainfully employed or you have a business, and that
You have
yung mga
no
psychological
previous-
tests,
no previous cases
no previous
filed,
cases filed. Kasi yun nga, kung may current criminal case against you, you will be either
Automatically.
the license or the permit can be removed from you, or you will not be allowed to carry firearms at all. No? And there are two types of license or permits that you have to get. One is that the authority to possess,
License
the license
to
to
own
possess,
firearms.
to own, and that's only for the home. Okay, and then there's a separate permit pa to carry the firearm outside of your home. And there are some professions na it's kind of automatic that you're allowed to carry firearms, like mga professions na medyo may danger, no, to your lives, like lawyers, media men, tayo yan, doctors, engineers, some businessmen,
Even
cashiers,
priests, some priests,
no?
yeah.
No? So the law is Republic Act 10591. So if you want more of the details and the requirements and how to get a license in carrying a firearm, you can check Republic Act 10591. Yeah.
Yes, and of course, don't forget the implementing rules which were issued recently. So check the law and also the implementing rules. And now we have some questions sent by our viewers on topics that we have previously discussed. Let's start with Joanna, who asked, what case should I file against a job agency who hasn't been remitting our contributions to SSS for 9 months? I have all the payslips. Can I still go after them?
Yes, just go to SSS actually. You can actually go to SSS. They normally have a help desk there, Officer of the Day, and you can actually file. SSS will help you and then to demand from your employer.
Yes, exactly. So you don't really have to file any case in court. You can go straight to SSS and they can go to the employer and hold the employer responsible.
Yes. Now, can a mistress, this question is from Ruth, can a mistress demand for assistance from her married partner if he got her pregnant?
Okay, from her married partner.
Okay, so she was the mistress. She gets pregnant.
Yes,
Can
you know,
straight
under
go,
the
yeah.
law, there are no exceptions. Even if your child is from an illegitimate relationship, meaning you're not married, and even if your partner is married, as long as this is your partner's biological child, then he has an obligation to support the child. So you can file a case for support against this man. And take note also that the new law, Violence Against Women and Their Children, applies to all types of intimate relationships, meaning kasama na dyan yung boyfriend, girlfriend, even if you're not married. And this has a provision that would allow you to get support as well.
Yeah, and especially if you're being prevented from being gainfully employed, no, and supporting and then the husband stops his support. So pwede for vowsy yun, diba? So,
Yes, that's called economic abuse.
economic
So
abuse, yep.
either file a civil case for support and also check the vowsy law in case he does not want to give support.
All right, so that is all the time we have for tonight. We would like to thank our guests who were with us earlier and also thank our viewers who sent in their questions via social media. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions or comments on our topic for tonight, you may share them on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.